Hi, welcome to a new episode in the Internet Surfer, hosting the most horror and creepiest stories from Reddit. Please don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy.
I was a doctor in a rural town when I encountered those who wear us, a horror story, from Reddit, r/NoSleep. The below is the story as I told it to the authorities. They did not believe me. I went to the media and again, they did not believe me. So, to you, Reddit, I write to you so that you may hear my story. Please, tell the world because I seem to not be able to. Beware of clouds that do not move, for they hide those who wear us. I splash my face with water and look up at the mirror to see a face far older than me staring right back. I hated looking in the mirror lately. 31 years old with wrinkling eyes and graying hair. Were my blue eyes getting even more pale? I asked myself as I stared vacantly at them. This is why I wear sunglasses everywhere. This bloody job is aging me. I splashed my face again, washing my tired eyes. I put my glasses back on and wiped the water out of my short facial hair. In the mirror, I eyed the dirty bathroom behind me. The orange light of a soon-to-set sun pushed its way through the frosted glass windows and illuminated the body fluid-stained bathroom a color that was reminiscent of an anxiety-ridden, Sunday sunset. Fitting, because on the other side of that door was a job I hated. I did not used to hate my job. In fact, I used to love it. But it wears at you, you know. Being a doctor. But what breaks you, is being sent to the middle of nowhere, away from your friends and your girlfriend to a town that shrinks year on year, with more missing people than there are people. I sighed and walked over to the window. I tilted it downwards to peer out into the town. Flat as the eye can see. Brown sand and streets stretching between a bunch of old, unattractive buildings before the desert begins. I used to romanticize living in an isolated town out in nature. Good for the soul, I thought it would be. Turns out, not all nature is great for the soul. Staring out onto a flat plain of sand, as far as the eye can see, does not stir up the endorphins. The sand is not reminiscent of exotic beaches or mystical dunes. It is more akin to the dirt you would find in a vacant lot behind an old motel riddled with drugs, gangsters, and prostitutes. Like the kind of place you'd find in this dump. I thought to myself. I sighed again. I looked down as I pulled my wallet out of my pocket. I opened it to reveal 2 Polaroid photos. One of the pictures was of my girlfriend, Kyra, and I at a wine farm back home. I had sunglasses on, a button-up top and a glass of wine in my hand. I was happy in that photograph. Your actions define you, but your inner monologue shapes you. Kyra would say to me. I nodded and looked up. I could see my apartment from the small opening in this tilted window. It was on the fire side of town. At least rent is cheap. I thought to myself. Gotta improves the inner monologue. Of course, rent was cheap though. No one stays long enough for a landowner to even bother driving up the prices like they do in the cities. Most people just get up and leave one day, never to say goodbye to anyone. Never to contact their family again. It leaves the housing market right open. I looked down at the other Polaroid. The boys and I at my best friend's wedding. Dressed to the nines. We all had crystal tumbler with an expensive scotch in our hands. The boys had all planned a trip to see me this weekend. I told them not to bother, there was nothing to do here. Drinking beers and seeing you is all we need, Jordan replied. Don't be a bitch, we're excited for this, Liam responded. Chris just sent a gif of a little boy throwing a rock at another boy's head. I laughed and so they continued with their plan to visit. I knew I should be excited to see them but the anxiety of getting through this work week was too powerful. Don't be a bitch. I muttered to myself as I looked through the window into the sky. The cloud was still there. It had come over during the weekend and covered half of the sky. It happens. One of the locals said. Yeah, it happens. Another responded. It was the second one I had seen this year. A cloud that stays still for however many days and then disappears overnight. I was at the local watering hole when this one arrived, and by watering hole, I mean the pavement outside the liquor store. That is where you drank in this dump. You bought a 6-pack and went and sat on the pavement drinking beers. I looked at my watch. Thursday, 17h47. 12 hours and 13 minutes and I can leave. I thought. Monologue. I could imagine Kyra saying. I forced a smile. 12 hours and 13 minutes and I get to leave. Good enough. Dr. Dan? Liz said after knocking on the door. Yeah? I responded. Fumbling to put the Polaroids back in the wallet, and that back into my pocket. Do you have a moment? I opened the door, exposing a long corridor with only half the lights working and 2 bulbs flashing intermittently. A pained groan drifted through the hall from one of the ward rooms. The hospital was far too big for a town this small. The 2-story U-shaped building was ideal for the town back in the 70s, but the declining population had made the size of this place redundant. A clinic in a shipping container might have even been too much for this place. A moment? I have a few. What is going on? More of a situation, a gentleman in the waiting room. He just walked in and sat down. He has not said anything other than that he wants to see a doctor. What is the problem? Is he hurt? I asked as we began walking. I peered into each room as we passed. Broken windows peered down into a dusty courtyard in the middle of the U-shaped building. Curtains missing from railings and old blood stains gone uncleaned. More rooms empty than occupied. There is no problem. That is the problem. He seems fine. No signs of physical injury. No temperature. Name? I asked. He did not say. I asked. I have tried collecting patient history, just like you have asked me to. But he will not talk other than asking to see a doctor. I am sorry. No need to apologize. You always do an excellent job. I spoke. Liz was the best nurse in this place. She grew up here. Her fellow nurses hated her because her father owned the liquor store. That made them the richest family in town. It also made them the #1 reason for hospital admissions. But Liz genuinely wanted to help. This was not just a paycheck for her. She always wanted to be a doctor, but her father could not afford med school, despite his liquor empire. She was smart though. Very smart. This town is smaller than my high school. Surely you know his name, you grew up here, Liz. I spoke. It is the man from over Bracken Hill. The one in the caravan. Ah. That recluse. I thought as we passed another room. I peered and saw a tall but skinny man covered by a bed sheet, standing, and looking out of the window. Only his faint, dark silhouette could be seen through the white sheet. Drug-induced psychosis. He was admitted because he went around town telling people he has seen God come down from the heavens and walk among us. Where does one even get drugs like this? Please check on Mr. Swart later. I said to Liz. The medication he was on was helping. He should not even be here, but there is no other place within days for him to go. Small hospitals like this, we must do a bit of everything. Of course. We passed one last room before reaching the stairwell. I turned to look at the closed door. I shook my head. MRI. Where is that bastard administrator? I asked. Still hasn't been seen since his tender ploy was discovered. Liz replied. I fondled a small vial in my pocket. The administrator had friends within the Minister of Health and managed to get a budget increase for the hospital a few months back. I figured we could hire an extra cleaner or two, fix some windows, even get new linen for the beds. Instead, he bought an MRI, an extremely high-end MRI. Incredibly powerful. 4 ultra-high-resolution scans. The type you would find in a prestigious university research laboratory, and now there is one sitting out in the desert. Who the hell would approve an MRI for a hospital in a town this small? I thought when I watched it get installed. Well, that was exactly it. We were never meant to get the MRI. The administrator's friend or relative or whoever was simply meant to be paid for it, and that was going to be that. But the authorities received a tip-off, and to quell the rumors, the administrator used the corrupt approval to get a bloody MRI. It was installed and the administrator never returned to work. Have not seen him since. I still get paid at the end of every month, so I could not care less about him, but the thought of a machine worth 10 times more than the annual GDP of this town sitting behind those doors disgusted me. Couple of months back, a child from a nearby farm was dropped off. He was attacked by starved dogs owned by a couple too poor to feed themselves, let alone their dogs. The child bled to death in my arms, the couple locked up and dogs put down, all because of poverty. I pulled out the vial from inside my pocket and rolled it in my hand. Prozac. It's only circumstantial. I heard Jordan's voice in my head. He knew nothing. He worked for a major corporate. Comfortable job. Easy life. He did not understand the need for exogenous help. You are the strongest guy I know. Remember why you are doing what you do. Your job has meaning. Worth. People have broken into tears whilst thanking you for doing what you do. You are making a difference in people's life. I just increased shareholder value for a bunch of fat old men. He had said months ago. He and the boys were trying to cheer me up over a beer on a rare weekend when I went back to my hometown to visit. Yeah. Try find worth amongst spreadsheets. Now that is depressing, Liam had said. He was an accountant, and like most accountants, he both bragged about it and hated it. Despite me disagreeing with him, Jordan's intentions were pure. He was the one who, in high school, always wanted to help people. All the teachers told him to become a psychologist or a teacher. But he chose to go into business. I did it for the money, so that I can provide for my family. I have the family, now I am just waiting for the money. He would shout whilst looking at the cost of homes. All right, George, I said as I slipped the vial back into my pocket, let's try it your way. I hated the numbness of how those pills made me feel. It was good for some days but bad for most. Liz and I left, making our way down the stairwell as someone screamed in pain from down the hall. Mrs. Moses. That was common. I have been reading the documents. I know how to turn the MRI on now. Liz said. You must be bored. I spoke. I just figured we might need to use it someday. If it is here, we might as well use it and help others. She spoke. The department said that they're coming to remove it one of these days. I responded. They said that months ago, but they are so bloody inept that they cannot even send a team to pick up a piece of tech that the rest of the country desperately needs. Couldn't even run a bath, I thought to myself whilst thinking of the health department. Monologue. I imagined Kyra's voice. I was doing my best to catch myself during negative, angry thoughts. Sorry, babe. I whispered. There he is. Liz said. The man sat upright on a plastic chair in the hospital's lobby. His clothes were as dirty as he was. He had long, blonde hair, or at least it used to be. It was sandier than the parking lot outside. He turned his neck slowly to look at me. I was met with wide eyes, exhausted of emotion. It was I was looking into a shell. Here's Dr. Dan. Liz said. No one called me by surname. I wish they did, but I felt too bad to demand that of the nurses. Jordan had said I needed to be more assertive, but I had to save my emotions for other battles. Hi there. I said to the man. Behind the dirt-crusted exterior, there was a tinge of familiarity in that face. "Hi, Dan." He spoke. "Shane?" I asked, finally recollecting where I knew him from. "I haven't seen you since high school." "Yes." "Yeah, didn't you leave in grade 10 because of—" I stopped myself there as the memories came flooding in. "Drugs," he said softly. Shane was expelled for selling weed to other students. Everyone knew, but no one told on him until at someone's 16th he brought meth. Even teenagers know when to draw the line sometime. "Yeah," I said awkwardly, "anyway. What is the problem, Shane? How can we help?" I asked. He sat there quietly, staring out the front window. "Shane?" I saw him. "Sorry?" I asked. "My uncle." "And?" I asked patiently. I wanted to tell him to hurry up. I know Jordan would've. He is a good man, but he is assertive enough to get the ball rolling when he needs. "Don't you remember? From school?" I shook my head. I was not cool in school and was not at the party that got him expelled. The meth. A girl, Sammy, from another school, took some home with her. She died. My uncle made the stuff, and he went to jail after I got expelled. And now he is out of jail. Do you think he wants to hurt you? I asked. If he does, we can call the police. No. He was killed in prison. Not too long ago, last week only. We buried him out there, in the sand. It is his land. He spoke, pointing past the petrol station opposite the hospital. Bracken Hill. The sunset fell behind the small hill and cast a shadow over us as darkness set upon this dust bowl. I dug the grave myself whilst my mother cried. I put him in there myself. You sure it wasn't someone else? I asked. No. I saw him outside my window. He was peering in. His eyes black with white irises. He smiled at me. His skin was tight. His eyes looked up to the windows of the secondary floor. My eyes followed him. A tall, pale ghost stared at us from one of the windows. Liz. Please go check on Mr. Swart. I instructed the nurse. My apologies, Shane. That is just a patient. He likes wearing his bed sheet. Where's Dr. Simon? Liz asked, checking her watch. That bastard wouldn't help anyway even if he did arrive. I complained. Simon. He was the resident doctor here. But when he was here, he did not even do anything. But at least he would usually be here. Today, he did not even bother showing up, so it was up to myself and Liz to run the show. I should pick up the phone and call him. In fact, I should pick up the phone the department, and tell them that Dr. Simon had been getting kickbacks from the previous administrator. He is the only one in town who can afford a first-hand car, let alone that sports car he drives around these sand roads. The phone lines hardly ever worked anyway. The municipality would fix them and then someone would steal the copper. Rinse and repeat. The usual. I would not flog him off anyway, even if they did work. I needed him to sign off this bloody post in a few months so that I could go home and get a real job. Monologue. I sighed. A job that I enjoyed more. Liz took her leave to go upstairs. If you feel like you're in danger, you should go to the police. I said to Shane. He shook his head. A soft, pained moan sounded from the nearest ward. I made a mental note to check on the patient. Fair enough. I said as I recalled when my bicycle went missing. I loved riding my bike, was the closest I got to feeling like I was getting away from this place. Woke up on Monday after a long call and the entire bicycle, including the bike rack, was gone. I called the police officer. Yes, the single police officer, and told him about it. He said it was a small town and it would show up. It had not since. So, I took the boring, 10-minute trek home every day. It happened when the cloud arrived, Shane said. On Saturday? Well, on Saturday evening, my motorbike went missing. I loved that bike. I would dig and make ramps for it up on the hill. I went looking for it and saw my uncle's grave had been dug up. Sunday night. I am looking out the window and there he is. He just walked off with his friends. His friends? Shane pointed at Mr. Swart under his white bed sheet in the window. Now that I noticed, he was staring right down at us. I looked at the sheet-covered man and back at Shane. It clicked. Damn it. Hi Shane, are you making and selling drugs up there? Over the hill? He nodded. He sold bad meth to Mr. Swart. He takes after his uncle and now there's probably some sort of epidemic of meth-induced psychosis. I should have told him to go perform a common weird act upon himself, but I decided against it. I have an oath to uphold. I went to the nurse's station to grab a clipboard to begin taking a full history. I scoured around the station and could not find a single metal clipboard. Only the wooden ones. I hated the wooden clipboards. My handwriting is terrible enough without those poorly maintained pieces of garbage worsening it. I grabbed one and sat beside Shane. Alright, first of all, I paused. I eyed the dirty parking lot outside. Not a single car. Shane. Who dropped you off? I walked. From Bracken Hill. That must have taken a while. I left on Sunday. Sunday? I can run up there in an hour. Walk in too. How did it take you 4 days? I got lost. He said with a tear coming up his eye. It streaked down his dirty face, leaving the only clean line upon his gob. The idiot was so high he wandered in the desert for over 4 days. I grabbed the bridge of my nose with my thumb and forefinger and sighed. We need to get you fluids ASAP. Mr. Swart isn't in his room. Liz said. I turned around. She stood behind me on the stairs. What do you mean? I can see him in the window. I said as I peered up. The broken window from which he stared down at us from was empty. Only darkness lay behind the sharp glass. The sun was deep below Bracken Hill now and the moon shrouded behind the still cloud. I only just noticed how dark the hospital had become. He was gone. A woman screamed in pain. Loudly. It echoed down the halls. Oh God. I slammed down the clipboard. Liz, admit him now that he is talking. Check him for dehydration, get him fluids. After that, find Mr. Swart. I will go check on that screaming patient. And where is Dr. Simon? I ran up the stairs in the dark. I opened the door to the half-lit corridor and looked around, trying to figure out which way the scream came from. The flickering lights in the corridor to my left briefly illuminated a blackened foot entering a room at the end of the corridor. I flinched slightly at the sight but just figured that it was Mr. Swart. The scream came from the other side of the hospital, so I made my way straight on. My immediate destination was a light switch. This bloody dump had not even figured out automatic lighting yet. I walked across the main corridor connecting the hospital to the other side of the U-shape. At the end of the corridor, I fiddled on the on-wall in the dark for a light switch when I saw something that made the hairs on my neck stand up. A dark liquid was smeared all over the floor. I have seen enough of that substance to know what it is. Light or dark? I reached into my lab coat and grabbed my Leatherman. Chris had given it to me years ago. All men should have a Leatherman. That is why I did not get one for Jordan and Liam, bloody core. Chris said with a giggle back then. In a hospital, anything can happen. Someone could have ripped open their stitches falling out of their bed when getting up for the toilet. Unfortunately, I did not know of anyone in the hospital who currently had stitches, and I had only ever seen this much blood once before. Oh, God. I pulled out my phone and immediately sent a text to Kyra. I love you, babe. Keeping my hand in my pocket with the knife flipped out of the Leatherman, I slowly crept down the hallway. I should not have been scared. A doctor should rush to help patients, but the corridor was dark, the scream was blood-curdling and now the floor a mess. I used my phone as a torch. As I passed rooms, I could hear patients quietly sobbing as I, myself, began to realize the type of blood trail that I was following. This was no blood drip trail. Someone, with severe bleeding, had crawled through here, or worse, dragged. My stomach dropped. I immediately ducked into the nearest room. I tried to steady my breath. I did not know if I could follow the trail. Don't be a bitch. Liam said in my head. Well, hate you, Liam. Scariest thing that has ever happened to you is a formula breaking in Excel. I took a few deep breaths, trying to calm myself. We tried to stop them. My head snapped towards the voice. An old lady in the bed of the room I pulled into. Dark skin wrinkled and leathery from years in the desert sun lay in bed under direct view of the cloud above from her window. She coughed twice before lifting a weak arm from her bed and pointing to the cloud. The elders tried. We thought we did. Back up on the farm months ago. I offered them my own daughter. They put her on and left, but they have come back. What the hell? I asked. I did not have time for geriatric ramblings. I turned around and made my way out the door. Liquid dripped to the floor from the last room at the end of the corridor. I could hear the dripping. Slowly drops fell to the floor. I creeped further ahead, forcing my legs to move. I approached the end room and turned into it, only to find a similar scene to what I had seen in my first few months of being here. I went white with shock as I remembered the call. Up at a farm, 30 minutes drive from here. A lady on a phone screaming for a doctor. A severe burn victim was seen walking down the main highway. No, she was wrong, not burns. The girl had collapsed and died by the time I had arrived, and what I saw then was the same as what I saw now. Hanging from the wall by metal bolts through his hands, was the flayed body of a slim man. Lips and eyelids as removed as his skin. Exposed muscles still twitched as his nerves sent pain signals shooting through the body and mind. Oh, Lord, I said softly, defaulting to my old religious habits. Strange. I had only been to church once in the past 12 years, and it was in this town's very church. I left early because it was not what I had remembered. It was strange. Their beliefs completely differed to what I had remembered learning. My hands were trembling. I needed to let the man down. If I call the police officer, he will only come when it suits him. This whole town is unreliable. I stepped forward to try and remove the corpse from the wall when something from the window caught my eye. Black silhouettes of tall, slender men moving down the corridor on the other side of the hospital. They were prowling through the dark building. I could see them through the window as they moved between the open doors. Liz was too short and stout for that to be her. Oh no. My mind jumped to Satanists or some murderous cult. I was in danger. I needed to help Liz, but what could I do? I turned to the flayed corpse. I wanted to apologize for not being able to help, but its eyes. They turned to look at me. It opened its mouth. Sky. Cloud. It muttered as it eyed me. I turned and ran. I sprinted to the nearest bathroom and slammed the door shut, cowering in a cubicle which I frantically tried locking it but failed, for the locks were no longer there. Just empty holes in the wooden door where the screws used to be. That was new. I put down the toilet seat, sat down and tried to calm myself. I felt a vibration on my arm. My watch. High heart rate. Your heart rate rose above 167 BPM while you seemed to be. I stopped looking at it. My head plunged into my hands. I looked and reached into one of my pockets. The vial. Prozac. I shakily opened the bottle, emptied the contents into my hand. This would be easier, I thought, easier than being flayed by a bunch of murderous cultists. Inner monologue. Do not be like that. Seeing you is all we need. Funk, I said as I carefully put them back in the vial and slipped them into my pocket. I wanted to see my friends, my girlfriend. I could not give in. I started breathing in deeply and poured all the pills back into the vial. A cold chill swept up my neck as the sound of scratching caught my attention. The window behind me was tilted open. I slowly turned around to look, and out of the window slowly crept a long, pitch-black arm ended by a hand with 3 long fingers and sharp claws. The arm started to bend and move down, as if about to grab me. I am a doctor, and it was my professional opinion that that was no human appendage. My mouth dropped and I tried to scream, but I had no voice. Shock had grabbed hold. I fell to my feet and scrambled out of the cubicle. The arm began to flail wildly as a low, guttural growl sounded out from behind the glass. I crawled until I could find my feet and stumbled out of the bathroom and into the corridor. I stumbled back into the old woman's room. I need answers. She had them. She was under her covers, grumbling, sobbing, and gurgling. Ma'am. Ma'am, what are these things? The grumbling, sobbing, and gurgling stopped. The bed sheet raised into the air, slowly, like a ghost rising from its slumber until its head hit the roof. 2 white lights shone at me from behind the sheet. A black hand reached out from under the sheet and pulled it away, throwing it to the floor. In its other hand, the half-mangled corpse of the old lady hung, partially devoured by a ceiling-tall creature with glowing white eyes and a grin filled with teeth. 2 arms, 2 legs. Like a human with an enlarged head with 2 small, white eyes. I screamed and grabbed the nearest thing to me, a bedpan. I threw it at the beast, and it slammed into its skull with a soft thud. The metal pan just stuck there and then slowly started to retreat into the beast. The tall, blackened creature shivered and oscillated as the metal broke down and was redistributed throughout its body. I shouted and pulled over a wardrobe. It fell into the beast, knocking it into the broken glass window. It shattered what was left of the window and fell through into the courtyard below. I heard it hit the ground with a thud. The beast let out a grandiose howl, one that I could feel in my gut. It was as if 1,000 ships in a dock signaled their horns at once from the gut of an alien beast. Thank the Lord, maintenance was too lazy to bolt those wardrobes down. I needed to find Liz and leave. There was at least one more of these things. Liz. I shouted as I turned and ran. Liz. We have to leave. I sprinted to the nearest stairwell. The lights flickered. Darkness and light. Darkness and light. I ran down the stairs and out into the main foyer. Shane still sat on his chair. He just stared outside, straight ahead. I remembered where I was in the desert. Why it took me so long to get here. Not now, Shane. I snapped. Liz. I shouted again as I frantically searched for her. I was not actually in the desert. I was with them. Behind the cloud. Shane said. Goosebumps crawled across my skin, and I stopped my frantic search. Shane slowly stood up and took his shirt off, revealing red, fresh scars across his torso. He looked like a poorly sewn shirt with huge hems around his shoulders, down his torso and up his arms. He unbuckled his jeans and they fell to the floor. His legs were the same. He was freshly sutured together, freshly sewn. They tried me on. I was too short. They put me back. But you, Mr. Swart, my uncle. You are the right size, they can squeeze. He simply stared at me with his mouth open and a vacant stare, as if his soul slowly leaked from his eyes. I investigated the parking lot, and the one that had fallen out the window was hunched over an aluminium bench. I used to sit there to eat my lunch. Its body was oscillating and ululated gutturally as it began to absorb the bench itself. Its skin beginning to reflect the flickering lights of the floor above. I turned my head to the stairs, and next to them, the door to our supply closet creaked open. A human hand creeped out from behind and beckoned me closer. I moved quickly to it, Leatherman in hand. As I approached, it grabbed my hand and pulled me in. I had to stop myself from stabbing Liz as she slammed the door shut and locked. What in God's green earth is happening? The nurse asked me, tears spilling from her eyes. I saw Mr. Swart. His eyes were glowing, and he was eating another patient. His head split in half from his mouth to forehead so that he could swallow her head whole. Oh God. They eat humans and metal. I spoke. And where us? Liz said through tears. Mr. Swart's skin tore open, and I saw something beneath it. I looked around the supply room and saw nothing of help until I saw Liz's keychain on her hips. Come with me, I said as I grabbed her hand. I pulled her out of the supply room and up the stairwell. Unlock this door. Why? Just unlock it, I shouted. She fumbled through her keys to find the right one when I noticed him. Mr. Swart at the end of the corridor. He was on the roof, belly facing the floor and arms and legs contorted backwards to hold onto the ceiling. His white eyes glowed as he began to crawl towards us. Hurry, I spoke. Mr. Swart ululated with deep growls and clicks as he crawled along the roof towards us, picking up pace. His face split open down in the middle and exposed a head filled with hundreds of teeth. Hurry, I shouted as I launched my knife at the creature. It hit the roof-climbing beast right where its head split open, and it screamed. It faltered for a slight moment and gave Liz just enough time to unlock the door. I grabbed the handle myself and swung the door open as the crawling beast reached us. It dropped from the roof, and I narrowly dodged the creature before shoving Liz inside the room. I slammed the door shut and locked it from the inside. I flipped a light switch and white light lit up the only well-kept room in here. The white, cylindrical tube of the MRI machine glowed under the bright light above. Clean, pearly white tiles shone. Get in the control room, I asserted as one of the beasts started banging against the outside. Liz, I need you to show me what you have learned. Liz opened the door and went into the control room. Begin turning it on. Why? No questions, Liz. Just do it. She booted up a computer and I could hear the clacks of keyboard keys through the radio used to talk to me. I slowly walked to the other side of the room. Next to the MRI. I unclipped my belt and removed it from my pants. On my signal, I said as I watched the door handle fall to the floor. The creatures were absorbing the metal inside. Turn it on. The door creaked open and Mr. Swart's head peered around the door. His bright white eyes were wide and wild. He smiled with a toothy grin as his unnaturally long neck kept extending out from behind the door. With a croak, he kicked the door open and behind him stood another one of those beasts, not wearing any skin. I shivered as I stared at them. I held my belt out, like a whip. As if it would help. God, I wish I still had my knife. Why did I throw it? Come on. Try me on, I shouted. They both croaked and growled as they ducked to stand into the room. The one without skin stepped forward and approached. Its hand split down the middle and a metallic bone protruded from it with multiple tool-like ends. They all were some sort of surgical scalpel device. Warm liquid ran down my legs. I held my belt buckle up as they approached. Full power, Liz. 7T. The belt buckle was ripped from my hand and slammed against the magnetic resonance imagery machine. I heard a second thud and stared at my knife now stuck to the MRI, covered in black gore. The creatures slipped and fell, grabbing onto tiles and gripping the floor. They groaned and their croaks began to turn into screeches and their screeches into loud, thunderous howls. I watched as something with multiple spikes began to press its way out of Mr. Swartz's belly. It ripped through and slammed itself against the MRI. A bicycle gear. I shook my head in realization. Thieving prick. I shouted. The creatures screeched and cried as bits of metal began ripping out of their skin, tearing them apart. Their claws peeled back and their grip on the floor gave in. The scalpel-like bone of the unskinned one snapped and flew at the magnetic machine. It sounded like 1,000 marbles thrown in a metal bucket. The racket was unbearably loud. The unskinned alien's grip failed. The entire beast was ripped from the ground and slammed into the machine. It squealed like a pig being thrown in a grinder. Mr. Swartz's grip gave in next, and it too flew into the MRI. It slammed onto its alien companion. Stuck on the front of the MRI, they roared in pain and the quintessential sound of bones snapping, skin tearing and metal creaking as it bends filled the room. With a loud pop, their skin gave out and black gore sprayed the inside of the MRI machine as thousands of pieces of metal burst inside the magnetic mass. The MRI shut down and I fell to my knees. In my rearview mirror, I watched as the cloud, uniform and unbreaking, slowly sunk behind the horizon of a rising sun. I looked at the piece of paper folded on my passenger seat. I smiled. "Dr. Simon," I shouted as the prick opened the door to his door house, "if I didn't sign an oath, I'd kill you." He reeked of alcohol and his eyes were dilated. I shoved a piece of paper into his chest. "Sign this, or I go to the department." He was so high, he did not even realize I was threatening him. He signed the papers and proceeded to pass out on his porch immediately after. I had offered to take Liz with me, but she wanted to get her family out first. I was not staying for another minute. I packed my bags, threw all that I owned in that town in my car, and I left. Now driving, I reached into my pocket as I drove away and felt the vial of antidepressants. I smiled as I threw them out of the window, for happiness was ahead of me.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.